Hi, my name is Bill Fairfield, and we're going to talk a little bit about Cucumber. Cucumber is a very powerful tool that can accomplish a lot of things for us on a software development effort. So in this video, we're going to look at three ways that Cucumber can be used. The first way that we use Cucumber is as a collaboration tool. The second way we use it is to test the business logic in our application. And the final way that we're going to use it is to test our application through its user interface so that we get an end-to-end test. So as a collaboration tool, Cucumber is a way for the developers, the testers, and the product owners to work together with the goal of coming up with a common understanding of what the application should do. The purpose here is to eliminate the developers understanding things differently than the testers who understand things differently than the product owner. To do this, we use an agile engineering practice called behavior-driven development. So in behavior-driven development, we start with a user story. In this video, I'm going to use a video store, and the user story we're going to look at is calculating the fee. Behavior-driven development is also called specification by example. And so what we're going to do is turn this user story into a series of examples. So on the slide, I've listed two examples. Each of these examples is going to become a test in our application. These examples are what we're actually going to put into Cucumber. Cucumber uses a language called Gherkin, and our requirements are going to be phrased in terms of given, when, then. So let's take a look at how that actually works. First, what does Cucumber look like? Well, it really doesn't look like anything. Cucumber is a plug-in to Eclipse, and so there's no way to know outside of doing it that it's actually there. So what I've done in this case is created a simple requirement, and you can see that I picked a simple one basically saying that if we don't rent any movies, the bill for that should come to 0. This is bare bones. I can augment this if I want. For example, I could put the user story in here. If I thought more explanation was necessary, I could do something like this, where I record the business rules. But for now, we're just going to look at this simple requirement. Notice that even though it's phrased in given, when, then, which is the Gherkin computer language, it is very readable by everyone. We don't need special knowledge or special training to understand this. Now, the other thing that you'll see is that normally I don't test like this, or normally I don't have a simple requirement like that. Usually I'll have something that looks more like this, where I declare in my given, when, then a series of variables, and then in each test case I provide a set of values for those variables. This is the collaboration view of Gherkin, and it is one way in which Gherkin can be used to make sure we all understand the requirements in exactly the same way. But it's certainly not the only way that Gherkin can be used. It turns out that what you're looking at here is an executable. This will run. So I have written a lot of code for my video store. Let's test to see if it works. If you look at this scenario up here will be one test, and then down here in this scenario outline, we will be running 4 different tests. So in order to run the test, all you have to do is tell it to run as a Cucumber feature. I'll run it, and just that quickly, it tells me that we had 5 tests, and all 5 of the tests pass. Now, one of the things that happens in every software development project I've ever worked on is the requirements change. So let's take a look at how that can happen here. So our product owner comes to us and says, hey, this is great, but we've come up with a new type of movie. And that type of movie is a children's movie. We need to add that to our requirements. No problem. I've added in a couple of new tests for the children's movie. And again, we will rerun this just by clicking my little green arrow. And this time there were 7 tests, and all 7 of the tests passed. Now, the question that you may be asking yourself at this point is, how on earth did I manage to pull that off? And the answer to that is that I had to write even more code. So what we want is to be able to go from the given, when, then into the actual Java code that I wrote. And in order to do that, we use something called a step definition, which is also called glue code. Glue code is normally written in the same language that the application was written in, and in this case, I did the same thing. So what does that glue code look like? Well, we're not going to go through it in this video, but you can see that there is just a lot of Java here. Now, very, very frequently, what's going to happen to us is that after we've developed our software, the requirements change. We get new requirements. And so let's assume in this particular case that that has happened to us. We now have another new requirement, and that new requirement is that we have frequent renters points, much like airlines and diners and pizza have them. And so once we understand the rules for these frequent renter points, we follow the same process. We augment our scenario outline. So now you can see that points are a variable, points are here. I have fixed the glue code, and I have incorporated it into my application code. So again, we're going to run this, and you can see how fast we actually run this. So this tells me that we ran 7 scenarios, and all 7 of them passed. This is referred to as living documentation because the requirements are the tests. There's no difference here between a requirement and a test. They are exactly the same thing. So what we just saw is an example of testing the video store application logic. You'll notice that I didn't go through any user interface of any kind. And of course, the question is, why would I ever want to do that? And the answer is on this slide. Very frequently, I have lots of different interfaces into my application. And so before I test to make sure that it's working with a web interface or with a mobile interface, I'd like to know that the logic in the application is correct. And so that's why we use Cucumber to test the application in the logic. Key thing to notice out of that was that the tests are what are called business-facing tests. They were all very readable and very understandable by business people. Now, the next thing that we're going to look at is testing through an interface. And so in this case, I have built a test, and what it's going to do is populate a form on a web page, and then it's going to submit that form and verify that I end up on the right page. So let's do that, and we will run this as a Cucumber feature. And what you'll notice is that it will pop up a web browser, navigate to the page that I want it to, click on the contact link, populate the form, and then end up saying, yes, we have the message. And as you can see, that particular test passed. Now, this is the type of thing where a tester will look at it and say, okay, that all looked really good. What would happen if the person didn't enter a name? And the product owner would go away and think about that and say, you know, that's incomplete. So what we want to do is pop up an alert. And then, of course, the tester is going to ask, what would you like to have happen after we pop up that alert? And the answer is, if you clear the alert, I want to go back to the page that we were on. So we phrase that in terms of our given, when, then, and now we're going to see, is the application actually written to do that? So once again, it is going to navigate to that same site. It is going to click on the contact link once the site loads, and then it's going to try and submit it blank, and you see it says the name field is empty. So that was the first test. Now what we're going to do is repeat that and make sure that after I clear that alert, we end up going back to this contact page. So the alert will be cleared. We do in fact go back to the contact page, and if we look down here, it tells me that there were 2 tests and they both passed. So in this video, we looked at the 3 ways that Cucumber is used: as a collaboration tool, and then to test the business logic in our application with executable requirements, and then finally to test the application end-to-end, where we go through and manipulate the application's user interface. I hope you enjoyed this brief introduction to Cucumber. Thank you very much for listening.